If you spend enough time online, you've probably seen the trending panic about World War III. But if a global conflict actually kicked off tomorrow, it wouldn't look anything like the trenches and tank battles of the past. Today, we're separating the Hollywood myths from the reality of modern warfare to figure out exactly what would happen, and more importantly, where you should go to survive it. A modern world war wouldn't begin with boots on the ground. Instead, militaries would immediately deploy weaponized satellites to blind their enemies from space. Down on Earth, soldiers might wear mechanized exoskeletons to carry heavy gear over long distances. But the most devastating opening moves wouldn't involve traditional weapons at all. They would instead be massive, coordinated cyber attacks. In a worst-case scenario, the opening shot might be a nuclear warhead detonated miles above the Earth's atmosphere to create a high-altitude EMP, or electromagnetic pulse. Deep inside facilities like the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, early warning tracking systems would detect the incoming threat, but there would be very little time to react. The resulting electromagnetic pulse would instantly fry unprotected electronics across the continent. Power transformers would blow, communications would fail, and the entire electrical grid would go down in a wave of darkness. In a matter of seconds, the targeted nation would be sent back to the industrial age before a single soldier crossed a border. So, if the global grid completely fails and the world's major powers lock horns, what is your geographical survival plan? Where exactly on Earth can you pack up and move to ride out the collapse in total safety? To figure that out, we have to look at two distinct types of conflict. The first is a conventional war. This would likely involve an enormous naval and air clash between superpowers, like the US and China, fighting for control over critical zones in the Pacific. This map shows the dense shipping lanes between Asia and the West. If a conflict breaks out, these routes sever immediately. The flow of cheap goods and essential components halts, triggering a massive worldwide economic recession. With American forces heavily diverted to the Pacific, regional powers would quickly seize the opportunity to violently take over the Middle Eastern oil supply. Surviving this economic fallout dictates exactly where you have to go. You need a location completely disconnected from the global supply chain, one that doesn't rely on imported fossil fuels or international shipping to keep its lights on. Your first major destination is safely in Iceland. Sitting over 1,000 miles from mainland Europe, its extreme northern latitude places it far outside the likely crossfire of a conventional war. But its real advantage is in the ground. Iceland generates all its electricity and heat using geothermal plants built directly into its volcanic landscape. Combine that infinite energy with abundant local fisheries, and the island is completely immune to global oil and food shortages. Iceland easily solves the energy and resource crisis of a conventional conflict. But if the fighting escalates to the nuclear option, you have to adopt an entirely different geographical strategy. The worst-case scenario involves the deployment of the roughly 14,000 active nuclear warheads currently sitting in global stockpiles. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, are long-range weapons designed to carry these nuclear payloads across the planet in a matter of minutes. This map illustrates how atmospheric currents would behave after the strikes. The air currents would carry massive plumes of radioactive fallout straight across the northern hemisphere. The resulting ash blocking the sun would trigger rapid global cooling, destroying major agricultural regions and causing widespread starvation. To get clear of these plumes, the most viable option is to move deep into the southern hemisphere. This leads to Destination 2, remote tropical islands like Fiji and Tuvalu, located thousands of miles away from any mainland target. These islands offer absolutely zero strategic value to a warring superpower. There are no massive oil reserves or critical mineral deposits for armies to fight over. Instead, they provide warm climates and self-sustaining marine food sources to keep you fed while the continents burn. If you want to survive without completely giving up modern infrastructure, Destination 3 is New Zealand. It combines the extreme geographical isolation of a Pacific island with highly developed cities and a government actively working towards total self-sufficiency. It also has an incredibly specific biological advantage. In fact, for every person in New Zealand, there are about 10 sheep. When global supply lines freeze completely, this massive animal population provides a renewable source of wool for clothing, milk, and protein to keep people alive. If crossing an ocean isn't an option, you need immense geographic armor. Destination 4 is Chile. The towering Andes Mountains stretch across the entire western border of the country, forming a massive physical barrier against invasion, while the isolated valleys below provide endless fresh water and fertile farmable crops. For the truly desperate, there is Destination 5, Greenland. There are practically zero connecting roads between its remote coastal settlements. That total lack of infrastructure, combined with brutal Arctic temperatures, makes it an utterly worthless target for any invading military force. And then there is the absolute final fallback. A handful of survivors could theoretically travel to Antarctica and bunker down inside isolated scientific outposts. You would be perfectly hidden from the war, at least until the unreplenishable food and fuel rations finally ran dry. Surviving the physical destruction of the conflict dictates that you choose between intense isolation or extreme hostile climates. But avoiding the bombs is only half the battle. The true test is what happens when you have to actually live in the post-war aftermath. The sobering reality is that a successful escape doesn't mean a return to normal life. Even if you manage to safely ride out the exchange in a tropical bunker, the global economy you left behind is permanently erased. International trade is dead, and the global internet as we know it is gone forever. Because many African nations rely on localized agrarian economies, they could continue to feed their populations even after the global trade network collapses. These regions, alongside the resource-rich and geographically shielded states of South America, would become the new pillars of human organization, stepping into the vacuum left by the former superpowers. Meanwhile, the nations that actually instigated the war would suffer the exact opposite fate. Their major cities and critical infrastructure would be reduced to irradiated ash, permanently stripping them of their superpower status and leaving them entirely dependent on the surviving nations. But here is the good news. During the Cold War, military strategists developed the doctrine of mutual assured destruction. This is the calculated understanding that a full-scale nuclear launch guarantees the complete annihilation of both the attacker and the defender. Because the fallout is so total and inescapable, triggering a global war remains highly unlikely. A global war remains a losing proposition for every nation involved. Staying informed and understanding the stakes is the most effective way to see through the doomsday headlines, knowing that those with their fingers on the button have far too much to lose to ever press it. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing to Deep Dive Daily, hitting that like button, and dropping a comment below.